We're now going to be talking to Varroc Engineering. Why are we doing that? Well, because they do have their facility in Poland, which is, of course, in focus. You're seeing a lot of the refugees and a lot of the people from Ukraine are entering Poland, and Warsaw is playing a big role in that. Mr. Srinivasan, thanks so much for joining us live right here on ET Now. You have a majority of your revenues coming in from the European markets. What challenges are you facing when it comes to demand, supply, and doing business with what is happening?
Yeah, generally speaking, the challenge faced by the overall automotive industry and passenger vehicles in particular for the last 1 year almost now is the availability of semiconductors, because of which the OEMs or the vehicle makers are not able to build the number of vehicles they would ideally like to, given the demand there is in the market. And that situation is continuing to persist, even though there is some improvement in the last couple of months, what we see from our customers. So that is the main issue, let's say, facing the industry today. And of course, the geopolitical issues are making it a little worse, I guess. But from the larger picture for the industry, the semiconductor issue still is the biggest challenge, which needs to be resolved or in due course, of course.
Now, OEMs are hoping that this year would be the year that the semiconductor, the chip shortage would become a thing of the past. Toshiba today morning has already raised the red flag, saying that a component, an important component for semiconductors to do with gases comes from Ukraine. Is the semiconductor shortage problem going to continue?
Not really. If you look at where the semiconductors are manufactured, the bulk of the manufacturing happens in Asia actually, and they are not really impacted that much by the uh, Russia-Ukraine crisis that's going on now, conflict. So the gas supply from Russia into Europe is a different issue altogether. And that, of course, also has implications in the wider context for the economy, because what we are seeing in Europe is energy costs have shot up in the last few months, which is also adding to the cost pressure that various manufacturers are facing. And of course, there is a limit as to how much of it can be passed on to the end consumer. So to that extent, there is a concern that this can lead to inflation, and that will dampen demand, and growth is definitely a concern. But that is not directly impacting the semiconductor supply situation.
Srinivasan, that there are plant operations in Poland. So how is that currently going, and is there any comment on the utilization levels? How they've been impacted?
Our plants in Poland mainly supply to our OEM customers in Poland, Czech Republic, Germany, and so on. So those have not really been impacted by the current crisis, because Ukraine as such is not a major automotive manufacturing base for any of the OEMs, and it's a market with limited volumes. Russia, of course, is a bigger market, and some OEMs, quite a few OEMs have manufacturing operations there. But our exposure in terms of supply to Russia or Ukraine is very small in the overall context. So that really hasn't impacted from a demand perspective. But automotive supply chain is fairly complicated in terms of the various legs of supply chain being in different parts of the world. And that is something which we are watching. And then there is also the overall logistics related challenges, because some shipping lines have suspended operations from Russia. There's issues with movement of containers and increase in freight rates, etc., which are also could be impacting. But in short term, for our operations, this crisis is not really having an immediate or a meaningful impact on the volumes. But we have to wait and see how it develops, depending on how long the conflict kind of lingers on. So we'll have to wait and see that.
Yes, that will closely be monitored. But what about the rise in commodity prices? How do you plan to mitigate the impact of this? Because it seems to be quite a worry from most of the corporates that we've been interacting with.
See, as a component supplier, so essentially we have agreements with our customers who are the OEMs for a pass-through of the cost, both cost increases as well as cost reductions. Normally it happens with a lag of 1 or 2 quarters, as the case may be. So in that sense, we are, I would say, fairly well protected in terms of cost escalations. And the real challenge is actually for the OEMs in terms of how much they are able to pass on to the end customers without impacting the demand. And that's a balancing act they are playing and taking a call with respect to price increases. But we don't see any significant impact on our margins per se.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking with us today.